Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Tessa Diarcangelo Ampersand. My pronouns are she, her. I am based out of our Sacramento office on unceded Nisenan territory. And I am the organizing program manager. So generally, all the work I do is focused on how we build our base, how we develop leaders, and especially do that amongst people who are directly impacted by the issues we work on, so that they can work side by side with us in all the civil liberties work that the ACLU does. And for those who are joining without video or sight, I will describe myself visually. I am a white woman with red hair, currently sitting in a very hot house that is under construction. So you see my drywall behind me. I'm here with Ana Teresa Fernandez and Edgar Arturo Camacho, and they are two inaugural artists in residence. They started working with us mid-2021 and will complete their residency this summer. And before we hear from them, I just wanted to share a little background about the residency and why we decided to have a residency at the ACLU. As an affiliate, we have worked with artists and incorporated art into our work for a long time. But the residency is an opportunity for us to take that one step further. With the residency, we are able to embed an artist, or in this case, two artists, and creative strategists into projects at our affiliate. And really the goal with this is that it brings a collaborative spirit that allows for art-based and creative strategies to be incorporated into the ACLU's work. And this is important because we know that art has the power to help people recognize and use their own power. Art humanizes issues and can help us build community through that shared humanity. And art helps us to imagine a path forward, which is especially important in this time of so much upheaval and chaos. And we can really lean into imagination and art and creative strategists to find a new way forward that hasn't yet existed. So without further ado, let's hear from Ana and Edgar. So Ana and Edgar, could you both take a few minutes to share a little bit about your work, your approach to art as a means for social change, about yourself, and we're going to share a few slides as Ana and Edgar are speaking, and we can kick things off with you, Edgar.
Hello, everyone. My name is Edgar. I am a queer, indigenous, brown person occupying Ohlone lands in Vallejo, California. And I'm excited to be here. Thank you for sharing space with me today. I identify as a visual storyteller. And so I paint mostly folks of color and queer people, and I center their joy. As a figurative painter, for a long time, I used to paint from a place of like pain and trauma, because from my experience, we're almost, as folks who come from marginalized and oppressed backgrounds, we're almost expected to regurgitate our pain. And I think a lot about like, what would my healing journey with myself and with my family, how would that have been different if growing up, I got to see folks living and thriving, folks who look like me, and who come from the same walks of life as me. Like, what would it look like if my family and I saw queer folks and folks of color living and thriving and being joyous? Like, how would that have changed the journey that I'm on? And so that's really where I'm at in my life, and that's where I'm really trying to paint from and create from. I think that also through academia, we're taught so often to like deconstruct, but in my experience, I wasn't taught really to like create and build. And so my art is an opportunity for me to do that and to really be able to work collaboratively with the folks that I'm painting. Historically, through art history, consent within figurative painting has been non-existent. We often see works in figurative works that are, that come from a male gaze or a straight gaze or a white gaze. And often there's no consent between the folks who are painting and creating and the community. And so I'm really trying to change that and build relationships with the folks, intimate relationships with folks that I'm painting, and making sure that I'm honoring their stories in a way that they want to tell it. So that's this is a little bit of my personal work. On the left here, you have Gabriel Garcia Roman, who's another artist from New York. And on the right, you have one of my sisters. Her name is Miriam Mosqueda, an indigenous woman, and she's powerful. And, you know, this piece specifically is really special to me. You know, she talks about her brown skin in one of her poems, and one of the lines is that not everyone can hold the sun in their hands without burning. And so that really resonated with me. And so I sat down with her and we created this piece together. And so the work that, you know, when I was selected to be one of the artists in residence with the ACLU, I knew that the work needed to continue in storytelling. And so if we can go to the next slide, this, you know, this body of work, which I'll talk a little bit more in detail in a few minutes, this is really centering the narratives of community partners and clients of the ACLU of Northern California. And, you know, that continues to really build on how do they get to tell their stories? How can we come together to make sure that their stories are honored, not just through the visual storytelling, but also through the symbols and the materials that are being used. So, you know, my work is acrylic, and these use acrylic mirrors to really invite a conversation about how community sees themselves reflected within the work through the literal use of materials. So yeah, that's a little bit about my work.
Thank you, Edgar. And it's hard to see in this slide, but I've had the opportunity to see this in person, and these pieces are huge, like the size of a wall. And so it really invites folks to see themselves and be kind of caught up in that story and pause and think about their role in movement building. Let's go to Anna now.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Ana Teresa Fernandez. I'm originally from Tampico, Tamaulipas, which is the traditional homeland of Olmec, Chichimec, and Huastecas. But I am actually currently in San Francisco, California, which is the traditional homeland of the Ohlone people. And one of the things that I actually wanted to share with you today, just because of what we've currently been experiencing tragically, and the title of this conversation being resilience, I actually took a minute to try and because I have different veins of work, more studio practice, more public art and agency work, and I actually wanted to deconstruct a little bit how it is that I go about creating for entities like the ACLU and other such organizations that are really trying to create movements, and not only movements as a, you know, that big umbrella, but like move the needle quite literally, and how we can transcend what's being imposed upon us. And so I just decided to do a little bit of a different, instead of talking about my work in detail. I came up with three just broader brushstrokes, which is identifying molasses. That's my first step. What issues are getting people stuck? The ACLU or any other organization will have issues where they notice people get frozen. They might have all the writing and expertise that look great on paper, but visually and proactively, they become paralyzed. Identifying what and where you need to connect the concept with your audience is my first step. So maybe going to the next slide, please. And then creating democratic creativity. For me, is access to participate is key in moving the needle. The more hands, eyes, hearts engage with creative practice, the more you're likely to elicit longer lasting change. Bringing the creative participation to the masses is critical. There's this practice that I call the Mona Lisa effect, which is sometimes when we have one item that everyone's expected to come and experience, and this often takes way too much time, money, or something that the masses do not have access to. Creating something that can travel, multiply, and simply be accessible to reach more of the community and creating a democratic process. Lastly, called implementation justice. there's a field in science called implementation science, and it is defined as the scientific study of methods to promote the systematic uptake of research findings and other evidence-based practice into routine practice, which fancily to say scientists create things, but they have the hardest time getting the community to actually do it, take the medicine, do take the actual steps of making themselves healthier. So I think I find this often in artivism, activism, whatever you want to call it, where we identify the problem, but there is something that lacks between the problem and the action. And so for me, I believe that justice can take a similar path through creative approaches as to implement practices that can change perspectives and the status quo. Experience. And I think that trying to create different, for me, it's creating hybrids of what already exists in vernacular design and helping it implement in everyday practice, such as this. Obviously, these are construction vestments in which we so often see in our everydays, but we actually don't notice. And so for me, it's like creating the literature of somos visibles, we're not invisible, imposed on these the reflective, hyper visible vestment of construction wear and safety gear. For me, was a way of kind of atoning with the mass sector of the population that actually goes unnoticed. And this was for a census campaign. Next slide, please, Tessa. And I guess I can go into this once you ask, we can answer the question because I don't want to go over my time.
Yeah. So Anna, one of your projects is called Tech on Our Terms. And really, as we were finalizing the details for that, San Francisco Mayor Breed launched an all-out assault on civil liberties when it comes to surveillance and safety. And a narrative has really emerged that crime is out of control. We're seeing people turn away from their values and a vision for safety that includes all people. And we're seeing otherwise progressive-minded people who are suddenly calling for more police, more surveillance, more punishment. The theme for tonight's event is resilience. And to me, resilience is also about sticking to our values when we're scared or we don't yet know how to move forward and build a new world. So my question for you, Anna, is how do you see art and the Tech on Our Terms project playing a role in that important part of movement building?
Well, I think that narratives are told and presented by perspectives. And the ontology of the narrative is usually complex with multiple angles, and it constantly changes. I often use the example of a broom. You do not see a broom as dirty when it's placed on the floor, but it becomes dirty when placed on a pillow. So as an artist, my role is to see the complexity of issues. Like anything, narratives change, they move, they flow. So the challenge of my work is to create an anchor that is both complex and direct, that has several entry points and is sturdy but flexible. So Tech on Our Terms resides with the no signal bars, the color bands, and taking this as a visual cue that so many people actually recognize, like when the TV goes out, which used to happen more in like analog TVs, not so much now, but you still see it when there's programming running. And not so much turning it on its head, but actually turning it on heads. So we created these very playful masks in the shape of bears and foxes to help hide people's identity, and using the recognizable technology error of this no signal glitch and reappropriating it to like a real life play and performance. So I'm well aware that technology is useful and we do use it in so many instances to benefit us, but it is to actually have people be able to choose when they don't want to. And so creating these masks of the fox and the bear, as well as we've created these hoodies that they're made out of the no signal bar. When it's meant so when people protest, they can wear the no signal masks. They're easily to download, cut up, and like share with your community as a way to protect your identity.
And Edgar, you've been gathering stories and meeting with leaders who are courageous and resilient despite so much trauma in their lives. These leaders are using their First Amendment rights, which I thought was an interesting kind of interplay between your and Anna's project. And they're using their First Amendment rights to advocate for themselves. And oftentimes, because of that, they're facing a new wave of trauma, a new wave of attacks, because they're putting themselves out into the public as advocates. And you and I have talked a lot about how there's a real tension in who gets to tell their stories, whose First Amendment rights are protected. So as an artist, how do you hold space for all these layers of trauma and also the resilience that can come from it?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, especially because, like you mentioned, Tessa, like who gets to share these stories and why, and I think that for me, getting to share intimate space with the ACLU NorCal clients and partners who I was very honored to work with, like seeing the pain and the trauma is so heavy sometimes, and I was able to see some of the parallels in my own struggle, especially, because some of the trauma, the pain, the issues intersect, with my own family separation story or with my own oppression, right? But also, I think seeing like the resilience and the power that the community has is so brilliant, and it's so needed. I think that one of the most powerful things for me was getting to hear for many of the folks that I was working with that there's like how, like they had never been asked, like, how do you want your story shared, right? How can we collaborate on making sure that your narrative is shared correctly and intentionally? And so, the pieces, everything about the pieces is intentional. And I know it's kind of hard to see the pieces behind me, but in the interview sessions that I had, these story gathering sessions, we got to talk about symbols and what symbols empowered the individuals. Folks were, invited to wear whatever makes them feel powerful, whatever makes them feel like they can tackle whatever it is that is going on. So you see, the piece here, Rising from the Ashes, you see the wings, the phoenix wings, you see the sword ready to take on the world. You see the mirrors, right? The mirrors allow folks to see themselves reflected and, to address really whose stories are being shared. And to the right, you see Janelle, right? This strong, beautiful trans activist who is responsible for helping the trans community get mutual aid when they've been shut out from essential pandemic relief packages over the pandemic, right? And so, getting to see the resilience and the strength and getting to work with folks in a way that, we get to share the story how they want the story shared. Because no one knows your story better than you, right? No one can tell your story better than you. And that's why it's so important for me as a visual storyteller to like work collaboratively and consensually with folks to make sure that their story is being centered and honored. And that resilience, I think, is what's beautiful and what makes this project so special and so powerful.
Well, thank you both. There's a lot of questions in the chat about how to see your work. Both Anna and Edgar created art that's very participatory, very oriented towards the community. So we're going to be planning activations around those in places like Merced, Fresno, Solano County. So we'll be sending out information about that.